Greetings, comrades. My name is Gigantos, and as you can see, I've clearly had my hair cut now. A lot smaller, a lot lighter. It's a lot lighter, my head is now. And hopefully my brains don't come out in the process now. And it's currently 29.8 degrees Celsius outside, so I'm going to try and do this video without trying to overheat in the process. If I look hot, and it's not just my naturally good looks, that's why. So anyone who's been debating with a lot of, well, I guess, almost militant atheists, really? Anyone who's had experience with them, one of the things that will usually come up when they debate with them is, why does God kill people? Or why does he say that you should go kill children and stuff in the Bible? Of course, there's reasons for this, which is why I'm making this video. But every time someone says that question and specifically says the word kill, know that they are making a very big mistake in the situation. To start off, first of all, in the Ten Commandments, one of them is thou shalt not kill. Killing is when someone takes the life of someone else. Is when someone takes the life of something else. So we can kill an animal, we can kill a person. Killing a person usually has a stricter sentence than killing an animal. But then there are two categories when it comes to killing someone. Was it intentional or was it accidental? That's the difference between murder and manslaughter. And the Bible does not say thou shalt not murder, it's thou shalt not kill. And the reason why is because we don't have the authority to create or end life. We can't physically create life, but we can end life. But we do not have the authority to do that. That's for God alone. And several times in the Bible it does seem that God seems to approve of killing. And we see that in, for instance, the conquest of Canaan, when he tells Joshua to go and decimate all the tribes and everything. Now there is a reason why this wouldn't be counted as killing, and that relates to God's character. You see, God is not human, okay? He is God. He is a spirit. He has the divine nature, whereas we have a human nature. One of the important aspects about God's nature is that he is unchanging, which means that unlike us, where we can go through mood swings and stuff and, go from, for instance, me not being very deep into the faith and me being very deep into the faith, unlike me, he's very consistent in who he is and what he believes. So to understand why God has never really killed anyone, we need to understand more about God's character. Now, God is described as many things, okay? He's described as, well, there's the big three. So there's omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, okay? So he is everywhere, he knows everything, and he is all-powerful. But there are other attributes that we need to take into account here that help us understand him further. For instance, he is just. And that means that anything God does, he does for justice. That also means that if God ever did anything unjust, then he will not be God. Because it's not just you need to be one of these things to be God. You will need to be them all. And so if a being came forward, okay, not necessarily human, but any being like an alien or whatever, and they came forward to being God, but they could have all the attributes except one, and they couldn't do that one attribute, then they wouldn't be God, the Judeo-Christian God. They need to be all or nothing, effectively. Now, the three that's most important here is that God is all just, he's all good, and he's all knowing. That's the ones we're going to focus on today. God, as I said, God being all just means that he cannot do anything outside of justice. If he does, if he commits an unjust, he is not God. God is all knowing, which means that if he says that he does not know something, then, or he ends up proving that that's something he doesn't know, then he cannot be God. And he is all good, which means that if he does something that isn't good, then he cannot be him. But then, and again, he is a standard. So he is the standard of justice. He is the standard of intelligence, in a sense, with knowledge, and he's the standard of good. Which means that for those of you who are aware of definitions already, have already realized that if God does kill someone, he's not technically not killing them, because as I said before, killing is when you take someone's life and it's unjust, okay? Because you do not have the authority to kill someone. So by that authority, by God as the author of life, he cannot technically kill anyone, because as the creator of life, he also has the authority to take it. Which means that technically God cannot kill anyone. By his literal nature, by his literal character, he cannot kill anyone, because that would be completely against who he is. And because God is constant, he doesn't change. Okay, I don't mean he seems to change his mind, no. I mean that because God does not change who he is, that means that this standard of who he is, this character of his, has remained constant from even before creation to the present day. And that's what's important here. The same God who ordered Joshua to go and wipe out the Canaanites is the same God who was on earth preaching forgiveness. So when God, in a sense, when he kills someone, let's say he does it directly, okay? For instance, if he personally strikes down someone, you can't just simply say, okay, because their life is over, he's killed them. No, I know it can sound quite strange, starting from the conclusion instead of the beginning of the investigation, instead of saying that because it's God who's doing this, everything has to be good for him. Well, yes, exactly, because again, he is not like us. We cannot apply the same standards that we do in our courts. Okay, sure, we may have people talk about in court this suspected murderer saying, oh no, he cannot be a murderer. We know him. We've known him for 20 years. He wouldn't do something like that. That we do have something like that does have some weight in a court, but the ultimate character really that you can judge by is God's, because he cannot do anything wrong at all. So it's fine to start from the conclusion in the sense that God did this for a reason, he is justified. We just need to find out why it is, because sometimes we may not have all the facts at the present day. And by using God's character, we can understand why he commanded something, or why he did something himself. When God takes someone's life or curses them, there is a reason why he does it, and we need to try and understand why that is. For instance, when we see, and I can't remember the name of the guy, but one of the sons of Judah, who was meant to go into his brother's wife to have children with her, but he kept pulling out and wasting his seed. The reason why God killed him was not because it was simply a small matter of, okay, well, he's spilling his seed and that's against the rule. No, it's more than that. You need to understand something. It's not what goes into a man that defiles him, but what comes out of it. What happened was God could see into that man's heart, and he could see that no matter how many times he went into his brother's wife, he kept pulling out. There was something within that man, okay, his heart, that was preventing him from doing this. It was more than just a disobedient act. That act was representative of that person's nature, and that nature was to disobey God. It may sound strange to think that it's something so simple, but remember, God can see below the surface or something. He can see below the surface. He could see that man's heart, and he realized, he's going to keep disobeying me. He's just the same as Adam and Eve, except that I've told him several times, and he's still ignoring me. Very well. Let's look at when he took David and Bathsheba. I hope it is Bathsheba's first son, the one who died. So who would have been Solomon's oldest blood brother, or oldest full brother. We need to remember that this son was conceived during an act of adultery between David and Bathsheba when her husband Uriah was out against. It wasn't Jerusalem. He was fighting against another nation. I can't remember what it was now. But this was an act of this is an adulterous act. And what the problem is that this child, if born, there would have been several problems in the situation. Okay, and that would have been, firstly, he would have been the illegitimate child, because even if David did marry Bathsheba, he was still conceived outside of marriage. That child would have had that stigma associated with him for the rest of his life. Secondly, David had a lot of problems when it came to his children. Okay, his eldest raped one of his daughters, and his second eldest, I believe, was Absalom, killed that oldest brother, and then created an uprising against his father, which worked for a short period of time. And then his third eldest son, because Solomon was nowhere near the oldest, his third eldest son was trying to not buy officials, but he was trying to get into good books of like all the high members of the court and stuff, having a party with them on David's death, while David was on his deathbed, so that he could try and take control over the kingdom and potentially kill Solomon and his wife, Solomon and his mother. Which then led to David immediately declaring Solomon had to be coronated as the next king. So when you see this situation here, you realize, if Solomon's son lived, would he have had a good life? And before you start using the argument for abortion, just hold on for a few minutes. God is all-knowing, which means that he would have known exactly what sort of situation Solomon's brother would have lived. Maybe that kid would have had, maybe he would have grown up depressed. Maybe he would have been attacked by his brothers, or being the result of an adulterous affair. We need to keep that in mind here. if Solomon's brother was going, because of the circumstances of his conception, even if nowadays we would say no, even if he was conceived in adultery, we should still accept him and love him, but it wasn't like that back then. If he was conceived in as part of an adulterous affair, that would have messed up the rest of his life, and David would have had to remember him constantly as a son of his lust, effectively, because he lusted after her. Okay, Chrome shut down for some reason. And the second thing is the situation between the brothers. For instance, when the servants first came back, and because what happened was, when Absalom wanted to kill David's eldest son, he invited him to a party, and David said, "Take all your brothers with you," because he didn't think that Absalom would do anything as long as all of his brothers were there. But he did. And so when the first servant came back, he said, "Absalom has killed your children." David was heartbroken. He ripped his clothes and he was crying and in agony. And then his other servant came along and said, "No, it's fine. Absalom just killed your elders." And that's because David doesn't care about his sons. So if there was further fighting between his sons, maybe even fighting between Solomon and his eldest blood brother, who would have, in a sense, been the rightful heir to the throne. If there was such conflict as that between the siblings, David's own children, that would have possibly led to another civil war, which David already had to deal with, again with his own son Absalom, and also with Ishbosheth, one of the last remaining sons of his predecessor King Saul. So when you look at it like this, whilst we cannot necessarily say all the facts of the case are present, by looking at God's character and the situation of Israel at that point in time, it's completely accurate to say that God took that child's life, not to hell, because David said that he looked forward to seeing his son's life, son is again in heaven one day, but he took that child's life because that child's life would not have been worth living, or would have caused trouble. Now, before someone says, "Okay, doesn't this not justify abortion?" and the answer to that is no. See, whenever there's a situation in which the life is taken in the Bible, that God doesn't punish, one way or another, whether or not it happens in the Bible or out of it, it's either God takes the life himself, or he tells someone else to do it. And because, again, relating to Joshua, God told Joshua to go and wipe out the Canaanites. He gave his authority to Joshua to go and take their lives, which meant that Joshua did not kill a single Canaanite in that sense. Okay, he took their lives, but he did not kill them, because God telling him to do that was just. Concerning abortion, the Bible does not tell us, and the theology necessarily, it does not tell us to take a child's life in the womb. The only exception is if the mother's life is in danger, or if both the mother and the child's life is in danger. Although some saints, I think Saint Gianna Beretti or something, she sacrificed her life so she could give birth to a fourth child. But the point is, we can only take a life if God tells us to. And concerning abortion, God does not go to a woman and says, you can take the life of your child. I give you my approval. He does not say that. He's very adamant about us not taking others' lives unless he approves of it. Because if we take a life without his approval, then it is killing. In his eyes, it is unjust. Concerning the Canaanites, we need to remember something about the situation there as well. These Canaanites were not good people. They worship. Let's look at the gods they worship. Okay, you have Asherah, Baal, Molech. Why is that the only ones I can remember now? Okay, let's focus on Molech, especially in this situation here. Molech was a god. He looks similar to, him and Baal, or sometimes they present the same way. Effectively, he was a man with a bull's head. And the way that they offered sacrifice to Molech was that he was a metal statue, and his arms were either usually almost. Okay, I'm gonna have to squat to show this. He was sitting sometimes. It's like he was sitting on a throne, and he was sitting like this, okay, with his arms outstretched like that. Now, although some of them apparently he had holes in his back or something. Now, the way that they used to worship Molech in the Middle East was that they would heat up the statue to red hot, and then they would take a baby or a child, and then place it on the Molech's burning arms. And then they would have a bunch of people playing the drums and singing the tambourines and everything, so that you couldn't hear the child's screams as they burned to death. And if the parents who were watching this shed a single tear, they would lose the money that they received for selling their child to be sacrificed. Now this is completely atrocious. This is completely disgusting behavior. How far gone were the Canaanites that this was normal behavior for them? Think about it. How far gone does a society have to be that a human life is even considered worthy of is considered low enough to be sacrificed? And not only a human life, but a child's life. And not just a simple, okay, let's cut his throat, make it quick. No, burning alive. The Hebrews never burnt any of their sacrifices alive. Not once. So think about that here. This is the situation we're talking about here. We're talking about a society that's corrupt. And not only that, but they also engage in other abominable activities. In there was also cult prostitution and polygamy and stuff. This was not a normal society. This was a corrupt region of the world. And so by looking at this, we need to understand that if God told Joshua to go and take out the Canaanites, there was a very good reason for it. He even says to Joshua and the Hebrews, do not copy their customs. They are abominable. And so he was effectively preserving the Hebrews from corruption, preserving their children's lives from being possibly sacrificed to Molech. And this happened several times when they did succumb to idolatry. King Hezekiah himself was, as the expression would go, passed through the flames. I don't know why I was doing that twitch. The point is, imagine this whole phrase in quotation marks, okay? He was passed through the flames. And that's an expression related to the sacrifice to Molech. However, God protected him and his mother rescued him. So, when we look at this, we see that the Canaanites, eradicating them to preserve the Hebrews, who were meant to be kept pure and clean and holy so that Jesus could be brought out of them eventually, that is justified. And then you may say, okay, what about the people who didn't take upon a sacrifice? What about the children? What about the people, the innocent people? Well, this is why you need to read the Bible in its entirety. It's an expression to, okay, one expression to use in the Bible is to go and completely destroy everything, okay? It's usually an expression, not necessarily a complete command. I mean, the exception was with the Ammonites, I think it was, the Amalekites, by prophet Samuel the prophet Saint Samuel to King Saul, who disobeyed him. He said, I want you to completely wipe out everything there. But when we read about the laws that the Hebrews had to follow when entering Canaan, we see stuff like, do not intermarry with the locals, because they may bring their idols into house with them. So think about this. What if God had commanded, take out the Canaanites, but do not marry them? Was he telling them not to marry dead people? Or is it possible that God gave specific instructions? Like if there was a man about to kill everyone in the house, the word of God came to him and said, do not lay a hand on these people. They are innocent. Or maybe God rescued them prior, and almost like Sodom, the Lot and his family getting out there before the judgment was raining down. People could have survived from those nations. People who didn't partake in that. People that God saw as worthy. But they're not mentioned in general, because that would probably cause confusion, or people would claim that, no, we were spared when they fled themselves. So not necessarily everyone in the cities was killed, which is why they were told not to marry, because they could have bring memories of their parents. For instance, children who escaped could have brought memories of their parents, brought idols as part of their tradition into the tents of the Israelites and everything. But when we see that, we realize that God doesn't kill children, okay? He does not kill children, he does not and he doesn't even take the life of children unless absolutely necessary, okay? With the Canaanites, he spared their children, he spared their lives, he got them out of there, and then said, hey, Hebrews, do not marry these people. Not to say that children's lives may not have been taken at all, because, again, when you look at the situation here, especially the Amalekites, if the entire cities had been completely razed, and you just had orphan children who would have starved to death, okay, otherwise, if God said, okay, you can take the lives of their children, I will take them to me, that would have been justified, because there was a valid reason for it. But that, again, that doesn't apply to abortion arguments, because God knows everything. If he approves of it, then he knows that child's life is probably not going to get any better. It'll be better for them to go straight to him. Concerning abortion, no human on earth can guarantee with absolute certainty their life will remain the same, or their child's life will remain the same. No homeless woman on the street who's given birth to a child can guarantee that her child will live on the streets for the rest of their life, in a horrible life, maybe dying young. They cannot guarantee that. So you cannot use these arguments to support abortion. So what we see from this is that God technically cannot kill a person, because killing literally involves taking the life of someone unjustly. But because God is a standard of justice, and with his own character and his own nature, he cannot do anything unjust, or wrong, or bad, or anything that doesn't involve him knowing all the possible scenarios and outcomes for this. You know what? Okay, Doctor Strange, you can suck it. You may have looked at 14 million versions of Endgame, but God knows them all. So when God takes a life, or he tells someone to take a life, it is the best possible outcome for that situation. Okay? We may not understand all the facts at this point in time, and that's fine. Okay, that's part about what faith is, okay? Not necessarily having all the facts, but having faith in God's character, that what he is doing is right, and that what he's doing is the best possible outcome to this. Now, before some of you make comments, may go, okay, what if God tells you to go take the life of someone? Well, you need to realize something here. Just because you may hear a voice telling you that can maybe, just because you hear a voice that tells you that it's God and they're telling you to go and take someone's life, doesn't necessarily mean that they are God. God may not have changed since the past. That doesn't necessarily mean that he acts the same way. The only person on earth who could have the authority right now to decide whether or not life should be taken is the Pope. And the Pope has made it clear that the situations required for taking life, such as, well, there's an alternative to life imprisonment, is not valid anymore, because we have facilities and stuff to help people like that now. We can help rehabilitate them. Okay, you know, with our massively improved prisons, there's very little chance of actually escape. Well, I can get into the whole thing about the death penalty another time. So the idea that God would, out of the blue, come out of nowhere and tell us to start taking people's lives, you know, without some form of justification for it, or a way to prove that it is God who is speaking, or the devil trying to receive us, that wouldn't work. Okay, this is not like the Judges, in which he comes to us personally, by ourselves, and then he tells us to go and raise an army and to get rid of the oppressors. Okay, this is something that needs to be hit down. This is something that the authority lies with the clergy. Okay, the higher ups in the clergy, the cardinals, the bishops, and the Pope. This is not something that's for us to decide anymore. We do not have the spiritual authority to do that, and that's where this all lies. Spiritual authority. If God gives a spiritual authority to a person to decide when or not to take a life, that is up to him, and that is up to the person, because he trusts them. They may abuse it, and then that person will be suffer punishment in death afterwards, when they die. But ultimately, only God can decide whether or not someone should live or die. And because that is part of his nature, that means he is just. Technically, he has never killed a single person. He may have taken a lot of lives, but that's all justified, whether or not we understand the full case of the facts or not. So for those of you out there who are concerned that, well, you know, maybe one of your friends came up, or someone you know that said, oh, God told me to kill the pagans and the heretics and the heathen or whatever. Let me put it this way. If you're not a Catholic, you have no way of proving them right or wrong, okay? Because technically, there is no standard, okay? The Catholic Church is God's presence on earth, okay? The Pope is meant to be the intercessor between not us and God, not us and God, like, you know, replacing Jesus, but but the Church, him as the head of the Church, is meant to be the intercessor between us. Okay, the Church is between us and Jesus is between us and God. Okay, there's no problem with that. And the authority that Jesus gave the Church allows them to look through cases like this, like saying, okay, this person's claiming that God visited him in a dream and told us to kill all the pagans. Is he right? They'll do an investigation and eventually conclude, no, he did not. This is just you making stuff up, or being heavily misled by the devil. The Pope that we have now is no different than the judges Moses appointed in the past to carry out the law. When Jethro told him, you seem a bit tired looking after all these people. Maybe you should appoint judges to help run and help you run instead. Because there, the authority to decide whether or not a life should be taken was handed to the judges. I'm not talking about the biblical judges, like the book of Judges. I'm talking about the judges appointed by Moses when Jethro came to see him. So unless you have that spiritual authority given to you by God, preferably with a historical background, or biblical background, any claim that we should go out and start taking lives is wrong. It is wrong. Only God can take someone's life. Only God can tell someone whether or not we should take someone's life. But unless you can prove that it is God telling you to take someone's life, there is no reason to take you credibly. That's it for this video. So anyway, if you like this video, please give it a like. Please just share my videos, and please comment what you think and any other video you want me to do. Please do subscribe to my channel so you can see more content, and please ring bells to keep up with my video releases. Next episode, not sure what I'm going to do. I don't know, find something. Maybe I can make a video. I might make a video about the barbarity of human sacrifices, actually. There was a very strange, on Facebook, there was a post about people talking about there was a post I was looking at on Facebook, in which it said, it was by this apparently infographics organization thing, and he said, and they were trying to promote not promote human sacrifice, they're trying to talk about human sacrifice. And in the comments, people were saying, oh no, the pagans are good. And I'm like, did you even watch this video? Anyway, it can be hard dealing with unreasonable people who won't even realize our ancestors used to kill people. Anyway, God bless you all. See you next video, comrades. Until then.